This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we've got a chilling update here. Donald Trump today spoke with military generals and basically told the U.S. military, the people that were in charge of the U.S. military, that we are now fighting an enemy from within. And he's obviously talking about American citizens. He's talking about people in blue cities or blue states. He has sent the military into Portland, into Los Angeles, into Washington, D.C. And so, first and foremost, what was your reaction to the fact that Trump called together the people that were in charge of the military and told him that the enemy here is not foreign enemies, but rather people within this country who disagree with him politically?
It was chilling, it was terrifying, and it is an alarm bell that is ringing as loud as any alarm bell about what we who are fighting for democracy are up against. Here we are against the end of the fiscal year. We may, in fact, have a government shutdown. And what Donald Trump is doing is assembling all of the top military leaders of the United States in one place. Now, first of all, that in and of itself should be disqualifying enough for Donald Trump, because why would you want the security risk, particularly when there may be a government shutdown, right? And therefore, the spending of money to, for example, have people fly back to their posts may be severely limited.
Right.
Why would you take the security risk? Why would you take all of that risk of publicly announcing that essentially for this period of time in which they're in Washington, D.C., they are not watching their commands. They are not doing those other things. Number two, as you say, he used it as an occasion not to say how we are setting forth a new foreign policy, not to talk about the role of the military in protecting and spreading democracy throughout the world. Instead, he used it as an opportunity to make a partisan speech in which he attacked Democrats, attacked the former president, and as you say, in perhaps the worst of the worst moment, the one that history books will record. He said that he believes the military needs to essentially train itself in American cities and needs to be fighting, as you say, the enemy within. And he also did this riff in case, before any of the bullshit Republicans say we're overreading this, he did this other riff where he talked about the oath of office and how, the oath of office refers to enemies, foreign and domestic. And he made a point of talking about domestic enemies. And we know from Donald Trump, when he talks about enemies in this country, he's not talking about, Russia, sending in, aircraft or drones. He's not talking about Chinese military balloons flying into U.S. airspace. He's talking about you, he's talking about me, and he's talking about the people watching this video.
And so in light of that, how are you thinking about how he views what he's doing right now as an essential part of his basically rise into authoritarianism? To what degree is what he's doing right here, this speech today, an essential part of that move from a democracy to a fascist state?
Oh, I mean, it's a critical move, and it's one of the worst. It's one of the, like I said, it's the most concerning because, let's talk about what he has compromised and what he needs to compromise. So he has already compromised the entire executive branch, right? I mean, like he has a cabinet that is entirely sycophantic. He has destroyed any independence of any federal agency. He's destroyed the independence of the Department of Justice. His Department of Justice is in court right now, as we speak, in the U.S. Supreme Court, trying to undo the independence of the Federal Reserve and undo the independence of the Federal Trade Commission, right? So that's number one, right? Capture the federal government. Of course, he's firing people and closing agencies. The second is to take over Congress. Now, here he's been aided by, a complete lack of spine and backbone by Mike Johnson and John Thune. But he has also exceeded his authority into theirs through tariffs and other things, right? So that was the second thing that he had to do. The third was the private sector. And boy, did they surrender quickly. I mean, we saw tech CEOs, billionaires, paying tribute. We just saw Google, YouTube just pay, 24 some odd $1 million to settle another bogus claim on top of what the legacy media has done. He has compromised the legacy media, obviously, to a fare thee well. And of course, then there's the law firms and the universities, right? So he has essentially attacked civil society. So what does that leave? It leaves two things. It leaves the courts, which, we have talked a lot about on this in this series, and he continues to chip away at that. And by the way, he will continue to chip away more and more as he starts to appoint more and more judges to the federal courts. That situation will undoubtedly deteriorate, and based on what the Supreme Court's doing, it may get worse even with the current personnel. But that leaves the military, the final pillar of American democracy. The idea that you have a military that is under civilian control but is not loyal to any person. There is no oath of office to the president. There's an oath of office to the Constitution. And Donald Trump needs to break that in order to complete his fascist, his authoritarian, his dictatorial, you pick the word you want. Okay, in order to get his aspirations in place, he needs the military to move to be loyal to him and be staffed with people who will do what he wants. And so what you saw was a speech aimed at that, at telling them, I'm going to ask you to do things, and I'm going to test you to see whether you do those things. And if you do them, then just like the rest of them, you're compromised and you're mine. And if you stand up to me, I'll fire you.
Do you have confidence? And I know that this is conjecture at this point, but judging from what you saw in that room, judging from what you just your own experience, do you have confidence that the military will be able to remain independent in light of Trump's immense pressure that he's going to put on them, the same pressure that's been able to bend the will of these law firms and universities and media outlets and nonprofits and tech CEOs and everybody else that he's leaned on?
Yeah, so not alone, but if there's enough strength of interconnected resistance or opposition or independence, again, pick your word, then perhaps. And what do I mean by that? You know, the law firms could have stood up. And if the law firms had stood up and banded together and none had capitulated, then you probably would have seen less capitulation among the media companies. And if the media companies had stood up and not capitulated, you might not have seen the tech CEOs. And if the tech CEOs had not capitulated, right? Like there is courage begets courage, and capitulation begets capitulation. So, you know, the question with the military is there's no question it has a professional ethos that is nonpartisan. There's no question that the officer corps you were looking at there sits silently in the room and not clap, not laugh, you know, is the best of the best. The question, though, is whether Congress will stand by their side or will vilify them. The question is whether the courts will protect them, right? Protect them from having to go into U.S. cities. Protect them from being federalized and misused in places like LA. You know, we look at the military deployments and I see a lot of people online, they're vilifying the soldiers or the troops. Those folks don't want to be in your cities. They don't want to be in LA, like you can see. And the question is whether the courts are going to allow them to remain focused externally, doing their job, being nonpartisan, or whether the courts, as unfortunately we've seen in some of these cases, are themselves capitulating and therefore compromising other branches. So, you know, we talk about a system of checks and balances, and that may or may not be the right analogy. I think of it more as an interwoven system than necessarily a checks and balance system, where each branch of government, each part of civil society, each part of democratic institutions play a role that strengthen each other. And when one or more get compromised, it isolates the others, and then they get compromised. And like you and I have talked about this in terms of some of the threats and hates I get, that you get. You know, there is a difference between feeling alone in those moments and feeling like there is community.
And before we go on, I actually want to take this moment to that exact point. You know, this is the perfect opportunity to elevate the voices who are actually meeting this moment with the urgency that it deserves. You have been absolutely relentless in calling out what this administration is doing without feeling like you have to capitulate or defer to both sidesism. So one small step that we can all take in trying to elevate media that doesn't do what legacy media does, that doesn't capitulate the way that legacy media has, is to actually support that independent media. And so I'm going to put the link to Democracy Docket, which is Mark's news outlet that he founded to focus on everything voting and elections, right here on the screen. If you have not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket, Again, this is the kind of fearless, independent journalism that meets this moment with the urgency that it deserves, that we need to be elevating, especially in light of the failures that we've seen from legacy media thus far. So if you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Mark, building on what you were just talking about, do you feel like there is any acknowledgement of that in light of all of the failures of these law firms, of these universities, of these tech CEOs and these media companies, all of these failures, and a kind of collective recognition of the extent to which, okay, if all of these people are doing it, it truly is making it more difficult for us to feel like we have any way to organize and stand up against this thing. We saw a little glimmer of it when people got together and boycotted Disney, and Disney relented, and then Sinclair relented, and then Nexstar relented, and Jimmy Kimmel is fully back on the air. That was a glimmer of what it looks like when folks actually organize and actually put their heads together to accomplish something. Do you think that there's some collective recognition that the tide needs to turn here? And do you think that we're going to see that in the way different institutions comport themselves moving forward?
I hope so. I mean, so I've taken two lessons from the last week. One good, one less good. The good one is that these capitulating institutions, they are not just weak and fragile when pushed on by Donald Trump. They are just as weak and fragile when pushed on by us, the consumers.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just we think of ABC News and we say, oh, look, it capitulated right at Donald Trump. Sinclair, it capitulated to Donald Trump. Nexstar, it capitulated. But look what happened. As soon as there started to be pressure from the artist community and the consumer community, as you say, they went right back. So what we're learned about these institutions are actually relatively weak in both directions.
Yeah.
And that should be a wake-up call to all of us who feel like we don't have any power, who think that Donald Trump can get away with anything. Like, no, actually, that isn't the lesson. The lesson is that if we organize, if 1 million or 2 million people call up and say they're going to cancel their Disney Plus subscription, this multi-hundred billions of dollars company is going to freak out and is going to reverse course. So that's the good news. The less good news is something I wrote about in Democracy.com earlier this week. I write for Democracy.com subscribers every Monday. And as I was preparing to write this Monday, I was overcome by not really writer's block, but by a sense of normalcy. Like I had just watched over the weekend as Portland, it was announced that troops were going to Portland. The whole situation involving James Comey, the enactment, the signing of a new gerrymandered map in Missouri. And yet on Monday morning, I woke up and I felt like, oh, today is sort of like, nothing special. And so it kind of like rattled me. Honestly, it rattled me because I was like, wait a second, I cannot normalize this. I cannot let these things that should be enormously consequential and shocking and disturbing just kind of blend into the background. And so that's what I worry about, is that, yeah, we have the power to push these institutions, but there come a point, Brian, when we just become so used to the fact that corporate America has capitulated. We become so used to the idea that the legacy media won't do the right thing, that actually we stop even canceling the subscriptions, right? We just kind of like assume that is the normalcy. And so I've recommitted for myself that I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to be very conscious about it, very intentional about it. I know you are, Brian, but I'm going to ask everyone out there to also, please check yourself. When you see that there are troops going into another city, don't let the shock that you had when it was in LA be any less shocked. In fact, you should be more shocked because it's more cities. Don't let the shock when Google or YouTube capitulates be any less than the first time you heard that ABC News or CBS was, right? Like, you cannot become inured to this. You cannot become desensitized to it. We need to stay vigilant about it, and we need to stay firm in our opposition about it. And so I'm going to ask all of you to do one thing right now, which is I want you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I want you to hit the bell to make sure you're alerted, because it is one of the things you can do to keep yourself checked, because Brian and I will keep bringing you this content. But the only way we can help you stay informed, and the only way we can help you be armed with the information and the facts to keep yourself and your family and your friends group informed, is if you're getting this content. And because Google is all about algorithms now, the only thing I can ask you to do are those two things. So subscribe right now, hit the bell. It is totally free, and we will do the best we can to help serve you.
I appreciate that. And one more time, if you are not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket, this is exactly the kind of outlet that we need to be supporting right now. This is exactly the kind of outlet that we need as our voice right now, especially in light of the failures of legacy media at this moment in time. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen. I'll put the link to this channel on the screen as well. If you're not yet subscribed to both, please go ahead and subscribe. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.